Indiana has 8 prisoners on death row. In this state, the death sentence has been used often throughout most of its history. When Indiana was given statehood in 1816, the death penalty was a component of Indiana's laws and culture. In the 1800s, hangings were very common, and occasionally public hangings led to violent crowds that killed the prisoner before they were hanged. When the electric chair was invented and used as the main means of execution in 1913, this situation was altered. The death penalty is still in place, but since it was reinstated in 1978, there have been only a small number of executions, less than 25 to be more exact. Joseph Edward Corcoran, 23 years on death row. His brother-in-law-to-be, and 2 of his brother's pals were all killed by his gunfire. Corcoran shared a home with his sister's fiancé, with his brother and his sister. He heard the guys talking about him and he grew furious. He secured his 7-year-old niece in an upstairs bedroom before killing them with a loaded semi-automatic weapon. Then he went to a neighbor's home and requested that they contact the police. Due to his paranoid schizophrenia, Corcoran has struggled with delusions and auditory hallucinations for a long time. When questioned about not seeking post-conviction relief, he responded, "I want to give up my appeals since I did commit the murder. I should be put to death." He is now 48 years old. William Clyde Gibson, 9 years on death row. He was found guilty of essaying and beating Christine Wittis. Wittis, a family friend, visited Gibson in his New Albany home to comfort him following the passing of his mother. Gibson has admitted to 3 homicides. Police uncovered Stephanie Kirk's body in Gibson's yard after he was apprehended for the murder of Wittis. Stephanie was a 35-year-old Charleston woman who vanished in 2012. He also acknowledged to fatally stabbing Karen Hodella in October 2002 in Port Orange, Florida. He is now 65 years old. Eric Holmes, 30 years on death row. Teresa Blossel and Charles Irwin were killed and he was found guilty. Holmes' employment at Shoney's restaurant was terminated as a result of a dispute with Amy Fauci. On the day of his dismissal, Holmes and Michael Vance waited in the parking lot after closing. As they left the premises, Fauci and 2 other managers were ambushed by Holmes and Vance, who stabbed them numerous times and took the money from the bank's deposit. Teresa Blossel and Charles Irwin, the restaurant's managers, perished. Fauci lived. Vance received a 190-year sentence in a separate trial.
Growing up, it was always, your mom's in heaven, mommy's in heaven, she's watching over you. I mean, I was 5 months old when my mother passed away. I had places to go, but I never had a sense of a home. And he took that from me. I never wanted to go murder somebody because I was mad because I've lost a job. You know, that's not an excuse. I was always told growing up that I was stubborn, and I got that from my mom. I didn't get it from my dad. I heard that my entire life growing up, you got that from your mom. There's nothing in this world that could happen for me to ever forgive him. He wasn't sentenced to life in prison, life on death row. He was sentenced to death. So I don't feel like justice has been served at all 30 years later. I probably wouldn't eat that day. Out of nerves, you know, thinking, is it actually going to happen, until it's done, and that sigh of relief that he's no longer here.
Holmes is now 54 years old. Kevin Isom, 10 years on death row. He fatally shot both of his stepchildren and his wife. After finding that his wife intended to leave him, he committed the crime. He then locked himself inside the family's apartment and opened fire on the authorities who were trying to apprehend him. Isom's defense attorney argued that a death sentence was not suitable given his client's emotional state, which was extremely disturbed after he lost his job and then his wife left him. Yet the prosecution emphasized that he drove his wife to leave by being incredibly harsh and disloyal to her. He is now 56 years old. Michael Dean Overstreet, 22 years on death row. Kelly Eckert, 18 years old, was essayed, choked, and shot by him. On September 27, 1997, after leaving for work, 18-year-old Franklin College freshman Kelly Eckert vanished. Her car was discovered abandoned the following morning in a rural region, with the keys still in the ignition. 4 days later, she was discovered in a ravine in Brown County. The victim had been shot and choked. The DNA recovered from her body was connected to Overstreet. He experienced childhood hallucinations and has schizoaffective disorder. He was let go from the Marines due to a mental health issue. In November 2014, a judge ruled that Overstreet was ineligible for execution. The Indiana Attorney General decided not to challenge the judgment. He's still waiting to die there. Overstreet is now 56 years old. Benjamin Richie, 20 years on death row. Officer William Toney was shot in the chest by him. Richie was seen driving a stolen car which led to a police chase. He smashed the car after the pursuit began, then continued on foot before shooting Toney. Richie suffers from a variety of cognitive and emotional issues. He suffers from bipolar disorder as well as an unidentified cognitive condition. Although the physiological condition source was not found, specialists theorized that a number of prior severe head traumas, his mother's significant drug and alcohol usage while pregnant, his own history of drug use, and the history of childhood abuse were the most likely causes.
Stealing cookies as a 7-year-old boy in school, turned into a 20-year-old killing a cop, landing himself on death row. It went from stealing cookies to shooting a cop.
In the year 2000, he shot and killed a policeman. At the time, Richie was on parole for burglary.
Richie is now 43 years old. Roy Lee Ward, 20 years on death row. He was found guilty of essaying and stabbing of a 15-year-old girl inside her own house. The victim's 14-year-old sister, who was sound asleep upstairs, heard her sister's screams. She made a 911 call. When police came, Ward was still inside the house. In 2004, Ward's first conviction was reversed on the grounds that jury selection had been affected by pretrial publicity. He was convicted once more and given the death penalty. Ward has been given a number of mental diagnoses such as ADHD and antisocial personality disorder. He is now 50 years old. Jeffrey Waysheet, 9 years on death row. He was found guilty of killing his girlfriend's 2 children, Alyssa, age 8, and Caleb Lynch, age 5, by setting them on fire. Waysheet admits using duct tape to bind Caleb's arms behind his back and placing a dish towel in his mouth after being apprehended. The boy's body was located close to 2 flares. The youngsters were alive when the fire was started, according to autopsies. According to him, he committed the act because the night before the fire, Caleb was acting off. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Waysheet is now 47 years old. Indiana has historically used 3 different execution techniques. Prior to 1913, hanging served as the main means of execution for people who were given the death penalty. Until 1995, when lethal injection was first employed, electrocution was utilized. In Indiana, the most common execution method right now is lethal injection. The state's law stipulates that a death row inmate must be put to death before dawn on the execution day. Indiana began using juries instead of judges to determine death penalty sentences on July 1, 2002. Only if the jury cannot agree on the death penalty would the judge intervene. Apart from federal executions at Terre Haute, the last person executed in the state was the murderer Matthew Wrinkles in 2009. After receiving a non-binding recommendation from the Indiana Parole Board, the governor of Indiana has the authority to grant mercy or clemency. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.